and welcome everyone, wherever you're joining from around the world. I'm so glad you're here with us for the Journey of Electricity, hosted by myself, Sweta Chakraborty. We don't have time, in collaboration with Hitachi Energy. We're at a critical moment. We know the energy transition is underway, and we know electrification will play a central role in decarbonization and building a more sustainable future. But getting there isn't guaranteed. Around the world, and even within regions, we're seeing different speeds, different barriers, and very real challenges in creating the energy systems that we need. That's what today's about, unpacking where we are, what's standing in the way, and what it's going to take to deliver a sustainable, secure, resilient, and affordable energy future. We'll be hearing from experts across technology and advocacy to explore not just the headlines, but the deeper systems and solutions that will move us forward. We'll start with a panel looking at the current energy landscape, what's working, where the gaps are, and what needs to change to meet the rising demand while we still need to cut emissions. Then we'll turn to conversation about the future, what an electric world could look like, and how we can make these conversations more accessible and inspiring, especially for the next generation. And we'll close with a fireside chat to reflect on what we've heard today and where we plan to go from here. But first, to get us in the right frame of mind, we're going to start by watching a short film from the Journey of Electricity series created by Hitachi Energy, which has inspired today's event. In this animation series, an electricity guru known as Electron guides curious teens on an immersive journey into the world of sustainable energy. This episode, Grid Guardians Unite, explores the life of heroic engineers working behind the scenes at the grid to keep us safe. So let's take a look.
Grid Guardians Unite! Don't worry, the experts have everything under control.
Wow! What is this place?
This is where the Grid Guardians power the world.
How?
During a big storm, engineers keep power on where it's really needed.
They turn my power off on purpose?
Sometimes they need to keep us safe.
Can they switch it back on?
Uh-huh, they can switch it on, all right.
It's safe.
That's epic!
Darling, this could be you one day.
Awesome, I hope you enjoyed that. So let's get right into this first panel. We're going to take a closer look at the current global energy landscape and explore what it will take to build a power system that's sustainable, secure, resilient, and affordable to be able to meet the rising demand. We're joined by leaders from technology and research to unpack both the challenges and opportunities ahead. So joining us first is Dr. Gerhard Salge, Chief Technology Officer at Hitachi Energy, where he leads global innovation in power grid technologies with digital at the core. Gerhard has also been the sponsor behind the Journey to Electricity series and is committed to inspiring the next generation of energy leaders. Welcome, Gerhard.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And also the Honorable Sherri Goodman, the Secretary General for the International Military Council on Climate and Security. Sherri is widely recognized for her leadership in advancing resilient climate-informed energy systems. Welcome back to We Don't Have Time, Sherri.
Great to be with you, Sweta.
And with us also is Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, founder and CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, one of South Asia's leading think tanks working on sustainable development and energy access. Welcome, Arunabha.
Thanks, Sweta. Great to be back.
Okay, so Gerhard, let me ask you first to please set the scene. What does the current global energy landscape look like today? Where are we in this energy transition? What do you see as the biggest opportunities, challenges, bottlenecks for clean energy growth?
Yeah, thank you for setting the scene so nicely, and let me directly go into that one, because we may see a little bit less of public discussion at the moment around this super important topic, but that doesn't mean we are not progressing. Fortunately, we continue running at speed really towards renewable build out, renewable integration, and managing it in the electrification. And the reason why this is running so stable, even if it's not every day in the top media headlines at the moment, is because it has become here with the solar and onshore wind renewables, not only the lowest carbon opportunities in generating electricity. In the meantime, it's also the lowest cost and it's the fastest to build it. And that is, of course, not just then sustainability-wise so convincing, but also economically. And what is important for us as Hitachi here to also emphasize that, of course, power generation is just one element in this electrification and energy transition. And it really needs to come together then in all the dimensions with also the demand side, where we see the increase in mobility applications, in cooling, in heating, in data centers, in industries, but then also with the power system, the grid in between. And part of that power system management is then, of course, also the storage. So these four elements always go hand in hand. And that's important for us. And that is also something in this journey of electricity, which really we want to make even more clear and keep the discussion and the awareness really alive, that all of this needs to come hand in hand. It's not just the power generation or the demand or the storage or the grid. It has to come all of these four hand in hand together. And we see that this is progressing, and that's great. But also we need to keep this discussion alive. So I'm very, very happy that we have this discussion today and very thankful for moving this forward.
Well, yes, thank you to you and Hitachi Energy for supporting this critical conversation. And we're talking about power. We're talking about, just electricity needs of consumers around the world. But it's bigger than that. And something we don't necessarily think about is the intersection of energy and national security. This isn't just flipping the switch and having our power come on. This is real security, global security across nation states. And this is where you work, Sherri. Talk to our audience a little bit about what are the biggest risks facing today's power systems. What does building true energy resilience look like in this moment of rapid electrification? And how do we ensure that the grid remains reliable? Why is it so important for the grid to remain reliable, and not just in cities, but rural areas as well?
Well, thank you so much, Shetta. Well, we say that energy security is national security, and being able to have secure energy supplies under all conditions is what protects our nations, but also what protects us globally and in our global security as well. So we've long recognized that for security forces, for military forces, need to have secure sources of power. And of course, they've always been able to be first in line. But what we've seen is that there's an increasing alignment between the desire to have sustainable and secure energy sources and being able to protect our national security. So as we move, for example, to improve both power generation and the way it's stored and the way it's transmitted, we've seen now that weaknesses in overall grid infrastructure can be resolved and strengthened by understanding where those weaknesses are. In some cases, improving the interconnects between the systems, and we have different challenges there in Europe, in the US, around the world. Also meeting the increasing demand growth for artificial intelligence that affects everything from the battlefield to transportation to health to everything we do in life today. And then as well, recognizing that sustainable distributed energy sources, often powered by microgrids at the local level, can also help us meet the needs of rural communities. We often find, interestingly enough, that rural communities and remote communities are often like remote military bases. They need to have their own secure sources of supply. And while that in the past might have been the diesel generator, now there are improved ways of providing that with renewables, with better batteries, And also that enables us to have more secure sources of power for communities and for forces in remote areas.
Super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to come now to Arunabha because we've set the stage. We're talking about how the infrastructure needs to be across the world, clearly for security purposes, which Sherri has shared with us. From your vantage point, representing India, you've also worked across emerging and developed markets. How are countries like India, which is the most populous country now in the world, there's such a need for urgent electrification, but also there's a need to meet its decarbonization goals. So what has been learned and how can these lessons be applied globally to other regions?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Sweta. The first lesson that has been learned is that you can have increasing energy access and faster decarbonization happening simultaneously. Over the last decade or so, our the number of households that didn't have access to electricity when the SDGs were announced was the largest of any other country in the world. And that has now been reduced significantly. So now about 99% of all households in the country are now connected to a wire.
Amazing.
This has happened at the same time as we have had a 388% increase in renewable energy deployment. So we've gone from about 510 megawatts of solar in 2010 to 232,000 megawatts of non-fossil electricity capacity today installed. Which is 49% of India's installed electricity grid is now based on non-fossil capacity. This is the first lesson that other developing countries need to learn, that you can do these simultaneously. The second lesson that has to be learned is that you have to do it in a financially sustainable and a market-friendly, competitive manner. And the way India has done it is through reverse auctions, which are competitive, open, transparent, and that has forced competition to bring down prices of clean energy from 6, 7, 10, 15 US cents to down to 2 US cents, 2.5 US cents. And the third thing that we need to learn is that this also generates huge amounts of employment. We notice that clean energy, solar, for instance, creates far more jobs than gas-based plants, certainly coal-based plants. But what we notice is that even distributed energy that Sherri was referring to actually creates 7 times more jobs than even utility-scale solar. So the solution that we are trying to offer as our learnings through our experience is that you can have jobs, growth, and sustainability all at the same time, rather than think of these as an impossible trinity.
That's really wonderfully put. This is a win-win-win if we do this right and pay attention to this and prioritize this. So thank you for that. Gerhard, back to you. This is something that Hitachi Energy thinks about regularly because it operates globally. And so how do you see readiness of different regions, like what was just described by Arunabha? How do you see different regions' grids supporting large-scale electrification for ultimately win-win-win?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I was very happy to hear what's happening there in India. It's a fantastic example. Just to be clear, no region, no country in the world is ready. This is a longer term process, and we need to develop this year by year, decade by decade towards the future system. And it's a huge transformation, but it is possible, and technology is there. And what's happening in India is one of the examples which is extremely impressive of what has been happening already. But also, I mean, India is large, and you have areas there which are still relatively conventional, but then you have other regions in India, like Rajasthan, which is one of the front-running regions in the world towards solar. And there's other regions in the world, like parts of Australia, parts of Europe, but also in North America and many other countries in the world, where you have these technologies then really progressing and front-running. And what's really changing and has been changing already and is continuously changing is that the grid owners and operators are much, much more forward-looking, future-oriented than it has been in the past. And that's, of course, very much needed and a fantastic development. And companies like us in Hitachi, we can contribute here not just by delivering equipment, not just by providing technology, but also by exchanging best practices around the world, and by that accelerating the know-how exchange and how technology is deployed at scale. Because that's important. To have technology available is one thing, but to deploy it really at scale in the appropriate ways across the world on platform technology, that is what really makes an impact and the difference.
And Sherri, I know this is something you think about as we think about deploying on scale, as Gerhard just said, and we think about modernizing and expanding the grid. How do we ensure that this deployment also includes responsibly building? And so it really earns public support so that the benefits are equitably distributed as well. How do you think about this?
Well, I think the example from India is spot on, because we see that we are able to have sustainable uh, energy and also provide jobs and economic growth. And I think we need to do the same, in many places around the world. We see that sometimes they're energy favorites, in certain parts of the world, and we need to ensure that we can use solid evidence to ensure that we're making the best choices, and also inform local communities who understand how they're paying for energy. I think most citizens don't actually understand what they pay, how they pay, why they pay for different forms of energy, but they get bombarded with various types of communication that often are more confusing than informative. So I want to really applaud Hitachi for sort of educating communities and citizens. I think we need a lot more of that, as you say, because people need to understand what their choices are, and particularly in North America, where there can be right now a lot of confusion about different energy choices and sources. And again, sometimes it's not even all about the generation of power, it's how it gets from one place to another. That's why, I think some of the examples of what the military, let's say the US military, has been moving towards deploying microgrids as just one example. There are many more, but one example of how to get distributed energy sources down at the local level. And they can be used for hospitals, for communities. I mean, there are many applications of this. And then other new technologies, from renewables with storage to the next generation of advanced nuclear reactors. There's all sorts of new opportunities that we need to communicate and socialize in different ways so that it can be acceptable to advance and meet the energy needs of the future in a sustainable way.
And in a way that is fair and equitable. So this is something I'm excited to ask Arunabha about, because I know you've thought about this. How do we ensure that efforts to decarbonize don't leave behind some of these vulnerable communities within countries, across countries? So we can talk about India, of course, but broadly speaking, around the world, vulnerable communities to climate change that are investing time, energy, and resources into moving into the future of energy in a way that is sustainable. How do we ensure that they also reap the rewards and the benefits of all of these efforts?
Well, Shweta, first we have to recognize that investing in access to electricity for emerging markets and developing economies is not just in their own interest, it's in the interest of the global economy. Why? Because it's now the emerging markets, developing economies are the locomotives of the global economy. Nearly 90% of all new electricity demand will come from these economies, because those are the places where new industry, new jobs, etc., are being created. Now, how do you do it in a way that is both financially sustainable and environmentally sustainable and politically and socially just? I think the first thing we have to understand here is that we have to look at this as part of what we call a larger green economy paradigm, that the energy transition is part of transforming the economy itself. I'll give you an example. One of our most fossil-heavy states in the east of our country, we've looked at 28 new value chains in energy, in the bioeconomy, in the nature economy, in circular economy. And we see that a very fossil-dependent state like Odisha can actually attract about $42 billion of additional investment in these new clean value chains and create over 1 million jobs. That's 10% of its entire employment. Now, that is, again, in a way, it's not just win-win-win within the energy space, but in the broader economy space. You look at sub-Saharan Africa, Namibia, it's 40% of its electricity is now coming from renewables. At South America, Uruguay, again, most of its electricity is now coming from wind. So when we begin to see that emerging markets are leveraging the clean energy story for their broader economic transformation, it begins to become a better political sell. The final thing I want to say here is that we've got to make sure that the energy transition, and again, Sherri referred to this, has to be brought closer to the communities. It can't be something far out, some wind turbine, some solar panel being planted somewhere. You need to touch and feel and see how this story unfolds. And when you look at these local communities in rural India, distributed energy used for productive purposes is a $50 billion market. In sub-Saharan Africa, just solar-based irrigation could be a $12 billion market. This is large investment opportunity. This is not just some feel-good pilot project here. When we internalize it, we realize that sustainability, environmental sustainability, also becomes politically sustainable and politically sellable.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We need to make that invisible visible, right? And reaching audiences and ensuring that they're part of the narrative and part of the conversation and part of the transition ultimately is what will result in success. So we're talking a lot about scaling clean energy here, but there's much more behind this. So Gerhard, back to you. In terms of securing a reliable energy system, we need more than just generation. We need energy storage, we need digitalization, we need high voltage direct current transmission play. Talk to us about why these technologies, what roles they play in creating a more resilient, decarbonized grid.
Yeah, technologies are a key enabler, obviously, in order to manage this. And digitalization, of course, is the key technology probably, which is now also coming up. Digitalization in our power system, in our power grids environment is not new. We are running grids digitally since decades. But of course, with the recent developments also in the digitalization space, this is very, very important for us also towards the future, because we are getting more fluctuations, more volatility, weather dependencies, and so on into the power generation. We are getting also more patterns which are unknown into the demand. We are getting more distributed storage also. So the complexity and size of this power system is increasing enormously, and digitalization is the technology to manage that, and also to optimize that. We heard about affordability and costs, and in order to run this and operate this really affordable, digitalization is key. But then there is also, of course, other technologies. You mentioned the high voltage direct current. That is one way of interconnecting grids which become larger. Why is it important that the grids become larger? Because you get better complementarity if you integrate a larger size of countries, of interconnected countries into one grid. You have better complementarity on weather patterns, on demand patterns, on different types of storages, and then you can level out the fluctuation in a better way. So technologies all across are very, very important in order to manage this future grid, the future power system, without compromising on the reliability, on the availability, but also on the affordability, which we are used to.
Excellent. Thank you. Same question to you, Sherri. From your perspective, what are the technologies, whether storage, digitalization, system design, that are really critical to creating a system that's not just low carbon, but also resilient and secure?
Right. Well, thank you. I mean, Gerhard said it very well. I mean, we're headed into a world where almost everything is electrified. and digitized, right? So you come into your house and it's all going to be electric. It won't be mechanical anymore in the future. You know, you'll be just touching buttons or talking to it, right? So how does that electricity, as an example, you know, get there? And when everyone has that, and then you have, so you've got an increasingly electrified world. You have an increasingly interconnected world. Geography matters, and then extreme conditions and extreme weather matter. And I think that's what's really important to be able to manage with new technologies. So, for example, the disruptions that occurred recently in Spain and Portugal, and also let's talk about the Texas grid. Part of that is because the interconnects on the Iberian Peninsula or from Texas into the rest of the US were not as solid as they might have been to have avoided and managed those fluctuations. There's a technology component to it as well. And then, you know, at the same time, we have these increasing extreme conditions, as we saw increasing hurricanes, floods, wildfires around the world now from climate risks that we increasingly face. And so at the same time that we're trying to become more sustainable and combat the threats of climate change, we also have to adapt and become resilient and make our energy systems resilient to those mounting risks. And that requires both increased deployment of technology and improved interconnects to manage the differentials across the different regions.
Sure. Well said. Arunabha, same question to you. What technologies or innovations do you believe will be most transformative for building this power system?
I think the main paradigm shift that we need is to stop thinking about the grid as something separate from the generation companies. Because what happens, say again, if you take a country like India, we're the fastest growing major economy in the world, but our power demand is growing faster than our economic growth, and our peak power demand, because of heat stress, etc., is growing faster than power demand. So if you only look at it from a generation perspective, then you'll go and build a lot of capacity, which then remains idle when you don't have the peak power. If you don't have that, then your grid collapses. This balancing of sufficient clean energy capacity, sufficient storage capacity, sufficient clean base load like nuclear, and then an optimized grid needs to come together. And India actually has one of the most integrated grids. It's the fourth largest electricity system in the world. And you can actually send an electron from the north to the south. That means you can generate solar in one place and wind in another place and hydro in a third place. I think one more point here is that we've got to start thinking about this regionally as well. I was in Southeast Asia just a couple of weeks ago. Same questions coming up. How do you optimize for hydropower in Laos and solar or wind in Vietnam and solar somewhere else, so that the economies get more integrated as their electricity systems get more integrated and interdependent? I think we are building the energy system of the future. And to me, it's not a choice of one technology or the other. It's a choice between, an imagination, a realization of the past and an imagination of the future and what choices we make. And so I think it's an exciting time.
It is an exciting time. I thank you for your thoughts on what technologies to get excited about, Arunabha and Sherri. I'm going to come to Gerhard for the final word as we're closing out this panel, and we're going to be talking about the future with the next panel of next generation energy leaders. But I'm going to ask you, Gerhard, as the champion of a Journey of Electricity initiative at Hitachi Energy, to inspire the next generation of energy professionals, talk to our audience a little bit about what you see as important through education and engagement, why that's so critical, and what's been the response so far in your efforts in outreach?
Yeah, it's when we started this journey of electricity with our electron character, we haven't imagined the success which then came. So in the meantime, more than 1.5 billion people have interacted with electron, and I mean, come on, let's be honest here. Electron is fantastic. Electron has become part of my family. I'm in love with Electron, like my children are, like my wife is, and we got so many feedback also of people from around the world who are in love with Electron as well. Why is this so nice to have this character representing the importance and also the excitement around this electrification? Because we need next generation of young professionals with the passion, but also with the competence and the excitement to drive this energy transition forward. And when I say a next generation of professionals, I don't mean only engineers, obviously. We need all the disciplines here really on board. And we need the young generation really to drive it, to run it across all the disciplines, but also as citizens, as people of our societies. So from a professional aspect, but also as citizens, also to share the know-how, to really spread that. And if Electron can help here and contribute and serve us in really doing so, then even better. And I'm really looking forward with big excitement to hear the young generation now in the following panel on how they see it, how they are in it, and then really listen there.
Excellent. Yes, Gerhard, thank you for helping us transition to the next panel. Thank you so much to our fellow panelists, Sherri Goodman, Dr. Arunabha Ghosh. It was a pleasure to have your contributions. And with that, we will kick off panel 2, what an electric future looks like. So welcome, new panelists. We are going to be shifting our focus to talking about the future, imagining what an electric world could look like and how young people can help to shape it. We're going to explore how to make energy topics more accessible, inspiring, and relevant for the next generation of leaders, which you all represent. So this panel features Mahak Agrawal, founder of All Bits Counts, board member of Atticus, correction there, and a communications expert working at the intersection of urban planning, technology, and sustainability. Welcome, Mahak. We're also joined by... Great to have you. We're also joined by Hikaru Hayakawa, Executive Director of Climate Cardinals, an international nonprofit that's making climate information accessible to young people around the world by translating resources into over 100 languages. Welcome, Hikaru.
Thank you for having me, Sweta.
It's our pleasure. And then we have Marco Gervasi, a youth energy ambassador with the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, where he advocates for youth engagement in Europe's clean energy transition. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you so much, Sweta, for having us.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited to kick this conversation off. As you saw, Gerhard was excited also to hear from you young leaders on this intersection of energy and perception and sustainability. And so we're going to start with you, Mahak, because you really work at that intersection. Talk to us about how urban planning, technology, sustainability, what all of that means to you. What does this energy future look like? And how might it transform the way we design and live in cities?
Of course. Thank you again, once again, Sweta, Hitachi Energy, and we don't have time. I would say that, if we look at the intersection of tech, sustainability, urban planning, and climate science, well, at this intersection, for us, electric future isn't just about cleaner fuels or, which new brand of electric vehicle should one buy. It's more to do with rethinking how cities function, who they serve, and what often invisible infrastructure holds them together. Plus, we also see that no two cities or countries are the same, which has also been discussed in the previous panel. So what we know from experience is that what works for Stockholm might not work for Nairobi or New York or New Delhi. And we need solutions that are not just scalable, but truly implementable and sensitive to local realities. When I talk about personal work across climate science and urban planning, I see electricity as a sort of a thread that runs through everything, whether it's housing, whether it's transport, whether it's water and sanitation, whether it's cooling or digital infrastructure. So if electrification in that sense is done wisely, it gives us that once in a generation opportunity to actually embed resilience and equity directly into the bones and the fabric of our cities. At ITICUS, which is the International Tunneling and Underground Space Association, and its Committee for Underground Space, we are constantly exploring how underground space, particularly the abandoned underground space and infrastructure like data centers, can reduce energy demand for dense cities. And we have various projects that we are working on across different parts of the world, including East Asia, South Asia, in the US and Europe as well. Whereas through All Bits Count, we work both on policy and behavior shifts, primarily currently focusing on the behavior shifts, because we believe that whether it's cooling our homes or charging our phones, energy or electricity isn't just, technical. It's something that's very deeply personal, and something that maybe also needs a better PR strategy just to make it more relevant to the general public.
Fantastic. And I've had the pleasure of seeing your work, and it really is like avant-garde in terms of how we think about future of energy. So that is critical, and this is exactly what we need the next generation to be focusing time and attention on. And we need to share all of this to get others excited from around the world as well to join in, because you are really operating globally, and that's critical to remember. And so is Climate Cardinals. So Hikaru, I'm coming to you. You're all about empowering people with knowledge, young people especially, so that they can contribute. They can be armed with important information relevant to protecting themselves, their communities, building wealth and security for their futures. And so what is your vision for electric future, and how can young people be at the center of really building it?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And as Mog said, thank you, Sweta, Hitachi Energy. We don't have time for having us. Our vision at Climate Cardinals for an Electric Future is one in which every young person, regardless of language or geography, has the ability to lead. Young people or people under 30 are half the world's population. We're not only the most impacted by outdated energy systems, facing challenges like power outages, pollution, rising costs, but we're also the most fluent in the innovations driving change. We're growing up in an era of global connectivity and AI and social media, and we have unique skills to organize, build, and implement solutions. However, as we recognize at Climate Cardinals through our work, there is a very significant barrier. So less than 20% of the global population speaks English. Up to 98% of climate information is only available in English. And that means that there is a lack of access to vital information in many communities that can inform decisions as consumers and voters. There's also an issue where there are a lot of communities that have ideas and solutions, but it's difficult for them to access capital or philanthropy. Around 95% of philanthropic foundations are in the global north. 60% of foundation assets are in the United States, mostly in Anglophone countries, and a lot of philanthropy is very relationship-based, which means that there is it's difficult for young people and for other people to really be able to scale their ideas. But there's a need for all of us to think together, to get together, to be able to collaborate and think about how we can create systemic change together, because we can't do all of this alone. And so just by young people, like the people who are on this panel here today, like recognizing issues in their communities, we can be able to do so much together. Thank you.
Yes, of course, and awesome. Keep up the really important work. So over to Marco. You've served as a EU Youth Energy Ambassador. You've been working on Europe's clean energy transition. So similarly to your fellow panelists, talk to us about what an electric future means to you, and how do you see it transforming the way young people live, work, and move in their communities?
Thanks so much to Hitachi Energy, and we don't have time for having us. Really, it's important. It's pivotal how youth are always having their seat. So thank you again for giving us the space. And my answer, I want to articulate by saying that doesn't represent just what electric future look to me, but what it looks for the young energy ambassador cohort that I can represent today as well. So to us, an electric future means a society powered by clean, renewable energy, where electricity is not just a commodity, but is an enabler for sustainability and opportunity, also for the equity. It is about rethinking how do we live and how we move, and an affordable electricity transportation, for instance, smart and energy efficiency home, and jobs in the innovative clean green energy space. It is also about fairness, because it's important to rethink the energy transition and placing youth at the center of it, where we are not just beneficiaries of this transition, but we actually drive it. And if we make the transition inclusive and youth-led, we will make sure that no one will be left behind. So we will talk about not energy poverty or electricity poverty among the world. So we really see an electric future where everyone don't face any of the struggle that current the current society is facing, and then where we lead it, and then we're transforming the entire energy ecosystem. So it's not just a commodity, but it's a new way in we can rethink the place and the role of each one of us in it.
And really make it accessible, right? And Mahak, this is something I know you think about. So picking up on some of Marco's comments, how do we make energy more relevant to young people, but to people generally? Because right now it's seen as too technical or too distant from daily lives. So how do we make it more actionable for the public? I know this is something you think about.
Definitely, Sweta. I think also sort of like touching upon the point that Hikaru mentioned, that language is often one of the key barriers when you're trying to communicate the science or make energy or electricity relatable. But I think more than that, what we are doing at All Bits Count is that we try and push for making science great, as what we don't have time also has been advocating. But at the same time, we say that we need to stop pushing science in its, natural jargon form at people, because we need to stop talking to people in acronyms and assumptions if we want them to relate to the story of energy and electricity. So, for example, like most of us wake up and the first thing that we do is immediately check up our phones. Like even if our eyes are not open, we simply check our phones.
Guilty.
But we don't wake up yes, but we don't wake up thinking about the grid or the electrons that are powering these distracting little devices. So when we work with local governments or informal settlements in India on energy transition, on energy equitable, access and supply of energy or electricity, it's rarely the science that sticks with the communities or with the policymakers. It's actually the stories. So when we talk about energy literacy, we don't push for dumbing things down. It's more about translating the science into what matters and for the audience or the stakeholder that we are engaging with. I'll give a quick example, which is like, let's start with something that's very closest to you. It could be your phone, it could be your charger, your fan, your air conditioners on a brutally hot day that we are witnessing in Delhi for past few weeks. They're all part of the energy story, but too often, whether it's in newspapers and print or digital media, we are telling the story with wires, with grid, with jargon instead of relevance and agency. And to do, to make it more relatable, to make it more accessible, we need to move from the megawatts to mindsets. That means using storytelling, using transparency, maybe even art, to close that not just emotional gap, but also relevance gap. So when people start seeing themselves in the energy narrative, not just as users, but as change makers, but as population that does get impacted, they show up, whether it's in terms of voting differently, holding systems accountable, or even asking better questions, or maybe not even better questions, but just uncomfortable questions to hold the systems accountable. And I believe, based on the work that we are seeing and noticing the impact, that's how change scales. That, when the energy story at an individual level, at a community level, feels like your own story, that's how you see the change snowballing in different time periods.
It's so interesting to hear from your perspective and in the work that you do, what's working and what's not. So I want to ask Hikaru the same question, because Climate Cardinals has been mobilizing a huge network of young people globally. So what have you learned through this work, and more broadly about what it takes to really engage and make this topic relatable to young audiences?
Yeah, no, I just want to reiterate Mahak's great points around just making sure that, from young people's perspective, how are we providing value to them? How are we providing information and stories that are relevant to them? And when we're doing our work, we always think about, okay, so as young people, what are we interested in? And also just realizing how diverse young people are around the world, and how there is a very important need to empower trusted communicators who actually understand who they're speaking to and what they're interested in. And so, yes, and then also just in terms of a lot of this information being very technical, the risk that we have is that people feel like it isn't relevant to their daily lives because they don't understand how it impacts them. They don't understand why they should care about this, or they don't feel like they have the background to really comprehend what's going on. And so there's just this overall need to center, okay, how are we creating value? Is that, and sometimes it's not just information that allows them to make decisions, but sometimes it's also hope and opportunities to take action. And so That's what we've
Right,
been
to make it
centering
fun,
in on Climate
right?
Cardinals. Yes. Yeah.
To make it engaging and to make it fun. That's what I'm hearing from you. And same question to Marco. How do you make these energy issues more fun, more accessible, more relevant to young people's daily lives? Because these topics obviously can be overwhelming. I mean, the three of you are incredible in translating the science and the data and all of that. But how do you generally get wider audiences motivated and engaged?
No, indeed. I just want to pick it up on Ikaru point. It talked about background on what do you need to understand the energy transition. And most of the time, people like are used to hear that to understand energy or industry decarbonization, grids, balancing, storage, you need to have an engineering background. So we need to stop like just this narrative and then starting saying the energy or industry decarbonization is for all and for everyone because it's interconnected to our daily life. And for instance, one thing we try to do with the European Youth Energy Network, which is a youth organization I'm volunteering with, is try to translating all the job and the subject around the industry decarbonization and renewable energy into a digital platform that talks to the youth and is navigable, is accessible, is kind of a fun game. So people can navigate, understand the subject in a digital way, because we also need to talk digital to the youth or in general to anyone that want to understand this kind of subject. Everyone will use their phone, but sometimes we can use phones or web app to understand more technical subjects such as energy, industry decarbonization. So that's one way. And the other way is definitely to link with our daily life. Like nowadays, like in big city, everyone uses, I don't know, the scooters, right? The electric scooters, and then just understand that they need to be charged. And it's possible that they can be charged because there is a battery system that is connected to the national grids. And it's just, if you just connect all the dots, you make it easy to understand to everyone, and everyone can connect to the daily life. So it's not just our phone, but it's everything we use nowadays. So I think to make it more exciting, we really need to make and fun. We really need to connect to what we do daily and to connect the dots. And also, of course, use the digital tools because we always are with our phones and laptops. So we need to make something accessible to everyone.
It's the first thing we do before we barely open our eyes, as Mahak said. This is so
Indeed.
so sad, but so true, and an opportunity ultimately, right? So, Mahak, please pick up on what Marco was just saying. You've touched upon it, but those who don't, you don't have to be an engineer, as Marco said, right? You don't have to come from a technical background. What advice do you give to young people who want to make an impact but don't necessarily have that technical training?
Absolutely. I think rightly, as Marco said, that energy transition or energy systems, it's not really an engineering challenge. And I think, Sweta, you also talk about it a lot in your work, that it's got a lot to do with behavioral, political, and cultural challenge as well. So one thing that I would say is that this entire transition or the system of energy in itself, it needs everyone on board. By everyone, I mean designers, data scientists, communicators, campaigners, artists, urban planners, and a lot more, experts and practitioners from different fields. For instance, I come from a climate science and urban planning background, but I have led campaigns on energy transition, shaped policy, and built coalitions across sectors and geographies, even if I don't have that engineering background. So I would say one advice would be, don't wait to be labeled as an expert or, to grow maybe like 10 or 20 white hair on your head just to be claimed as an expert or to get someone else's permission. Start where you are, no matter what your age is. Stay curious. I think that's maybe a value or a tendency that we are sort of losing, especially in the social media driven world. Ask questions. Don't wait for the perfect question, even uncomfortable, maybe something that seems like not a great question. Just ask questions and partner across disciplines and borders, because I think that partnership and collaboration often just gets lost in the narrative or in the conversation. Another thing would be honor your unique perspective, whether it's your lived or local experiences. They are your superpower and you should not be diminishing their value. And finally, I think one thing that I love to say is that energy transition or climate action isn't a club for just a few, members. It's much more than that. And the energy grid, well, it's a lot bigger and more welcoming than people realize, for young people, for not so young people. So just be a part of it without worrying about anything.
Excellent sound advice. And by gray hair standards, I think I've officially made it to expert. But my advice to the next generation is don't wait for that. We need your voices. And so I'm so appreciative to this panel. I'm going to come to Hikaru and Marco for last words before we close out with a fireside chat with Gerhard again. So Hikaru, let me come to you first. Just in one sentence, as in this last minute, talk to us about what you say, why clean energy matters to your friends, to your family. In one sentence, really, what do you say?
Clean energy is opportunity and better lives. It means less pollution, lower energy costs, less climate disruptions, and more jobs in the communities that need them most.
Nice. Very well spoken, like somebody who does media and translating and talking to audiences on a regular basis. Thank you, Hikaru. Marco, same to you. What is that? If you had one sentence to explain to a friend or family member, what would you say?
I would say that clean energy means powering our life without destroying our future. So what could matter more than that?
Fantastic. Okay, Mahak, I'm going to actually let you say the final sentence as well. What's that final sentence?
I think it's gonna be sort of on a similar tangent and maybe directed to an Indian aunt and uncle. It's gonna be more like clean energy is our best bet to not just keep the lights on, but at the same time, not cook our future or the planet like we do with vegetables in a pressure cooker.
We cannot cook our planet the way we do vegetables in a pressure cooker. Okay, I'm going to leave this panel with that
Yes,
final
yes.
imagery. Thank you so much, young energy leaders today and of the future, Mahak, Hikaru, and Marco. Please continue your excellent work and join us again for a We Don't Have Time broadcast in the near future. Thank you to all three of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
So that brings me to the final fireside chat with Dr. Gerhard. Okay, I am thrilled to close out today's event and to be joined again by Dr. Gerhard Salge for a fireside chat. Gerhard, as you know, is the CTO of Hitachi Energy, and I'm going to ask him to take a step back and really reflect on the insights that we've heard, explore what gives us hope, and discuss what's really going on to help build an electric future. So, Gerhard, we've covered a lot of ground today, from grid modernization to electrification to inspiring the next generation. Looking ahead, what gives you the most optimism about the future of energy?
Well, I think that's very easy for me to answer, because when I listen to the three young participants just now, that is exactly what gives me hope, what gives me energy, what gives really here all the future outlook. When I hear, first of all, the passion, the energy here, the three colleagues have been really spreading, this is already fantastic. But when I then put on top of that the clarity, how they analyze, how that is, what is important, but then especially also the social competence by getting really everyone involved and committed, I must say, wow, really, really impressive. And that gives me another kick of motivation also, really to continue that, because I see how clear here the key topics is addressed, and that's people, that's societies, that's how we drive this forward, this extremely important question of the energy transition.
So, I mean, clearly Hitachi Energy is already doing this, but what's the most important thing that industry more broadly can do to really inspire and equip the next generation of clean energy leaders? Because look, as we just saw in the last panel, if we give them a platform and we give them an opportunity to share their voice and their work, I mean, it's not just inspiring as it is, it's inspiring us as those who are older and have been working in the space longer, but it's inspiring their peers. It's inspiring the next generation. So what can the sector do to really give support for the next gen?
Yeah. And I think the key thing was mentioned in multiple of the answers. It is, we need to take away this myth of electrification being complicated, being a technology I don't understand. Every one of us around the world is in contact with electricity every day. And one of the members was saying very nicely, there is no wrong or stupid question. Ask the questions which you want to have answered. And we as an industry, but also with all the other stakeholders, we have to answer those questions. And if we give a too complicated answer in the first round, ask us again. And then we have to adjust so that we get the commitment, that we get the onboarding. Because the great thing is that the technology to make this energy transition happen is there. What's missing is what we can develop while we are transitioning, but we don't have to wait for any technology. And we have to deploy it at scale, and we need to have really everyone on board doing the contributions in your daily life, in living it in a future-oriented way. And then we can really make happen what was also said in the first panel, this combination of economy, of sustainability, creating jobs, but also keeping energy affordable.
So if you could leave the audience that's tuning in right now from all over the world, all walks of life, those that might have been a little intimidated by this subject matter, but now after listening to leaders, really at the peak of their careers, as well as the next generation, kind of rubbing shoulders and talking about the future of clean energy, what would you say to them? What's the one key takeaway from today's conversation about building electric future that you would want them to know and take away?
Yeah, join us in the energy transition if you are not already on it. And it's really our choice. We can make it happen. We can create jobs. We can do and serve one of the best purposes you can imagine, really, with lowering the carbon emissions. And we can do that for a sustainable future for the today's generations and those to come. And I couldn't find a better place for me to be in than in this energy field, in this electrification field these days. And I would love to see from the young generation as many as possible joining in all the jobs, in all the competencies, in all the roles and functions across the world, so that we make that happen together.
Fantastic. That's a wonderful call to action. We love that we don't have time when we can leave audiences with a real tangible action step. So you just provided that. Thank you. I hope the audience heeds Gerhard's call. Thank you so much, Dr. Gerhard Salge, for tuning in and contributing for today's broadcast. We've heard powerful insights on the challenges and opportunities ahead, from the technologies that are driving change to the partnerships that will shape the energy transition, and finally to the role that each and every one of us can play. I hope today's conversation will leave you not only informed, but inspired to be part of building a sustainable, secure, resilient, and affordable energy future that is truly equitable for all. Thank you to those of you tuning in. Thank you again, Gerhard.
Thank you, Sweta.